Hello and welcome to Lightcast webinars. We're really excited to have a guest speaker today who's joining Will Cookson from Lightcast. And they're going to be discussing all things to do with different ways of being people-centric in things. So if you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please put them in the control panel on your questions box and we'll get back to them at the end of the webinar. I will be sending out the recording and the slides at the end of the webinar, so please keep your eyes open for that. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to you, Will. Hi, Will.
Thanks, Debbie. So yes, as Debbie said, today we're going to be speaking to Nikki, who's joining us from Naturally Talented Me. Naturally Talented Me are a partner organisation of Lightcasts, and I think it's going to be really interesting for a number of reasons. First, as I'm sure you're aware, there's plenty of new policies out there. We've got a very tight labour market, but policies such as levelling up, policy drivers such as levelling up, No One Left Behind, UK Shared Prosperity Fund, along with others. And the approach that Naturally Talented Me take, I think, is really relevant to how you engage people that are further from the labour market, how you help them to understand and define their talent, and therefore how employers can tap into that as well, which seems really relevant. So just to take you through what we're going to cover off today, here's the agenda. The obligatory introduction, slightly different in that I'm introducing Lightcast rather than names that you may have known us by in the past, such as MZ Burning Glass or MZ or Burning Glass. Then we're going to, I've moved this back actually, the poll is going to be towards the end, so ignore that. Then I'm going to introduce Nikki from Naturally Talented Me. She's going to tell you about their organisation, share a really interesting example, a case study, talk about their people-centric approach to data. We will be exploring key policy drivers, and then we're going to hold a poll. And as Debbie mentioned at the start, if you've got questions, we will get to those right at the end of the webinar. But you can ask those at any point in the questions box on the right-hand side of the widget. So just to introduce Lightcast for people that don't know us, we are very much focused on providing people inspired. We are inspired by people, I should say, and the communities we work in, and we are informed by data. So we are a trusted labour market data provider. We work with a whole range of organisations through the worlds of economic development, education, along with careers organisations and all sorts of other partner organisations, including local government, central government, local enterprise partnerships, and so on. What we're trying to do is help people and organisations better understand the world of work, and we're committed to helping our customers by providing robust and trustworthy data, which is very much defined by skills, and essentially looking at how an individual or an employer's offer relates to the wider labour market, which is very relevant to what we'll be discussing today. So we provide data in a number of different ways, from structural labour market information using official government sources of data, which we model into a proprietary data set. We also have job postings data, which gives a real-time view of what's happening in the labour market. And we also have professional profiles. And then we also, bear with me a second, provide software solutions, some of which we'll talk about today. And we provide data via APIs, and we also do research. So a whole wide range of ways in which we can support organisations to better understand the labour market. Now I wanted to formally introduce Nikki. Nikki, great to have you with us today. And I thought it'd be a good time for you to introduce Naturally Talented Me to those that don't already know of the organisation.
Hi everyone. It's great actually. Today's a little bit for me quite exciting as well, because what we're talking about today is around that concept of thinking differently, very much around, you know, how we start to use specific pieces of information to help people think differently about themselves, but also to invigorate the marketplace a little bit more by kind of transferring that so that organizations have that different thinking approach to when they're looking at recruitment. One of the key parts for Naturally Talented Me is we're very much taking the approach that today is very much about people being able to be seen for the value that they have. It's not about labels, it's not about, you know, people with situations, circumstances, age, etc. This is very much about how do we provide a level platform for everybody to be seen for the talent and potential that they have. So that's very much how we're driven. It's driven by that whole approach. Next slide, sorry, please, Will. Thank you. So when we talk about that kind of thinking differently, it's very much about how we get people individually to think differently about themselves. We all get caught up in situations where, you know, we just stereotype into particular requirements that we have, and perhaps miss some of the core talents that we as individuals can bring to the table. But also I think organisations have got very stale in the way that they're looking for those diverse talent pools. And so what we're trying to do with our platform and to invigorate that is to provide people with somewhere where they can understand what their talents are. We can help them to unlock those, and we can also give them a platform that gives them something to showcase, to really shine and actually show who they really are. And that's the important part about this, that this is about engaging with individuals as much as it is engaging around how we understand the people data that we gather through the platform and how we can use that to support those individuals to create those See Me solutions that they have, and then to provide those to employers to attract them to them. Naturally Talented Me launched in May 2020. Sorry, next slide, Will. And we were driven by the challenges that were happening at that point in time. You know, there was already a very large proportion of people who were furthest from the job market. But with the impact of COVID and with the changes going on in the market, we felt that it was actually the right time to try and support those people, because they were going to become even further from the job market. So for us, it was very much about a people-driven approach, how we can support people in thinking differently about other opportunities that might be available to them, but also getting those furthest from the job market further up that ladder so that they could actually be seen for the value that they have. We've been recognised recently, which we're very proud of, in the Startup Awards for the UK as Social Enterprise for the South East, which for us was also a major tick for us to say that what we've been doing really has been recognised and been seen as a value. But we're not just focused on the individuals. This is about everybody. It's that inclusion piece. So we're also working and embracing the digital technology era so that we can work wider with larger communities. And those communities could be anything from primary schools through to intervention organisations, through local councils, local government. So it's all about bringing that opportunity to think differently and how we can widen that into the communities so that we can gather that people data so that we can support everybody, give everybody that opportunity to be seen and found for the potential that they have. We are very much about removing barriers. So when I show you a little bit more about our case study, you'll see why that's really important, because it's taking away that one-minded focus about these are the only things I can do, these are the only things I'm capable of doing, or these are the things that people are telling me that I can do. It's about opening that box wider and saying, you know, you as a person have so much potential. Let's showcase that, and let's make sure that you're applying for opportunities that probably things that you wouldn't have thought of applying to before. So we are very driven by how we support individuals into finding work-based outcomes. I think it's a good point just now just to stop and just show you what a See Me profile would look like, because I think it's always a lot easier to see the reality of it. And this is what an individual will see as part of their development path through the platform, and how they put together and showcase their abilities. So this is a really great case study. And Sam, we've removed obviously the full identity at the moment. We've also got the ability to hide personal information, which I know is a big thing about GDPR and sharing and security. All of that is taken into account. So actually, you know, if you're working with particular vulnerable communities, you can actually remove some of that personal data, but still use the people data that it actually generates and showcases. So Sam is a great individual who had a number of challenges of his own, and potentially would have been one of those furthest from the job market, based on his circumstances, based on where he was and the community group that he was within. But actually, Sam suddenly realised that those talents that he has, which have been unlocked through going through the platform and looking at his hobbies and interests, have given him a much more open mind about, you know, who he is and what he could do. And it's very important to know that, you know, your talents are all about your personality, they're all about who you are, and they are absolutely key when you're looking for the right type of employee for an organisation. You know, we all talk about skills, we talk about training, we talk about development, but actually if you haven't got that foundation of the right behaviours, the right drivers and those right sort of natural instincts, then it's harder to get that person to be a good employee. So this is about those foundational pieces. So Sam's talents are shining through, attention to detail. There's a number of different ones there that really showcase him. But the next part of his CME profile is the real nutshell of why this works for individuals. This is no more about sort of word-based CVs. This is about, how do I show what I'm capable of? How do I show what I can do? How do I really make myself shine? And how do I then attract people to what I can bring to that table? And Sam's talents are, as you can see here, you know, it's all about visual imagery of his drawings, his pictures. He's a very talented young man. He spends hours creating animation videos. He's even done a piece to camera, which was quite a challenge for him as an individual because of his circumstances, but he's even produced a video talking about himself and about what he's doing and what he can really bring to the table. So actually, this is also about building confidence in yourself. It's about building confidence in that there is something I can bring and there is something I can offer to employers. And the other part about this is, once obviously you've got this rich portfolio, it also, as part of the back end of the platform, will match you to a whole range of career opportunities. Sorry, next slide, Will. And those career opportunities potentially could be ones that you would never have considered. I mean, we're all very confident when we look through the job board ads and we see particular job titles and we go, oh yes, I know, but I'm not sure I want to do that or whether I'm capable of doing that. And there's also the jobs where you understand what the job is, so you know, potentially you make that decision on whether you could. But there's also jobs that you look at the job title and think, I have no idea what that job would be, so why would I bother applying for it? So what we've done within our platform, working in parallel with Lightcast and with regard to career coaches, we've mapped all of the 360 plus stock codes. So all of our roles are now talent profiled, and that produces that ability to be able to match the individual's talents to those career opportunities. We're also working with particular sectors who are struggling to employ, because this is a completely different approach. It's not trying to drive or, you know, work in construction or work in this particular industry. What we're saying is, actually, as an individual, you might be matched to that industry without actually realizing that you could do those particular jobs. So it's a very rich visual format that we provide, and this is then the kind of front end of how we support the individual themselves. But in the back end of this, there's also a whole raft of different pieces that bring together that people data. Next slide, please, Will. So just to kind of recap on that, because I think it's important to kind of understand why this is different and why this is unique, and why actually we see this as being foundational to a number of different community groups as well, because it does build confidence and belief in potential. You know, if you know what your talents are, you then know and feel confident in what you're doing as a person. It actually creates that self-worth as well. We found a lot of people have suddenly gone, oh, you know, I didn't realize I had those talents, because actually we do these habitually every day. We do our hobbies, we have our interests, but we don't really take into account that that actually foundationally gives us a set of talents. You know, my perfect one is patient, and actually I'm the least patient person if you ask my kids. But actually the reason it's got patient is because I could sit for hours and draw and paint, and those things take a huge amount of patience. So they might be actual talents that you don't realize you possess. But overall, it brings people into a platform that's a lifelong support mechanism. So the platform will be there. It will offer up matches to roles that they could do. It will match them to current jobs that are being advertised on the platform, and it will continually support them in their development, whether that's through education, whether that's through their career development. But it keeps building, and it keeps that content and that visual content growing and expanding, so that then that becomes almost that lovely rich portfolio that we're looking for. And again, if you actually understand, you know, the types of jobs that are open to you, it helps you to build the confidence in taking on new skills, developing your knowledge and your understanding, and developing the skill sets that you need when you start looking at the actual labour market information, so that you can bring those together. So it actually engages people and brings them into an ongoing platform that supports them throughout. I've talked a lot about the kind of people-centric piece. So what does that mean from how are we going to map that to the labour market information? So let's look at it as a UK-wide piece as an example. So the massive big picture idea of this, in that people data is really, really important at the moment, because unless you know where you are and what you've got, it's always very difficult to then work out where you need to go or where you could go. And I think that's the connection point that we need to bear in mind here, is that using Naturally Talented Me can provide that foundational view, and then bringing together Career Coach, which I know Will's going to talk about in a little bit more detail. Bringing those pieces together then builds that understanding and that cohesion between this is what we've got and this is where we need to be, and these are the gaps and the bridges that need to be made to enable that to happen. So it's building that picture. Now, the picture could be around a multitude of different pieces of information, and we're currently working with a number of local government contracts who are looking at how they understand some of the inhibitors into work, as an example. So these are just particular situations that we're working on at the moment, but we can expand these with the platform itself. But if we think about inhibitors, they could be as simple as, well, you know, financial barriers. How do we know that about these groups of people? How do we understand what those barriers are? It could be, you know, do these people have digital access? So when they come into their community groups, the only time they get to use sort of technology is within those groups. And again, they're the types of things that help to build that people-centric view, that data of understanding what's out there. Travel restrictions, you know, again, they are quite a big piece when you're talking to groups that are furthest from the job market, where they have particular challenges. You know, they can catch the bus to college, but actually going anywhere else could be difficult. So it's actually bringing that data picture together. Now, a lot of this would be in the back end of a portfolio, but it's that part that really drives the community engagement and how you use that data to support every single one of those participants within that community group. We can also provide that view on, you know, how that all comes together with regard to the hobbies that they've got, as an example. So it might be that if you're a school, for example, and you're looking for after school clubs, you could use the hobbies mix to look at that. So again, it's suiting different requirements for the community group. It could be you want to look at the talent landscape, and that's really powerful when you're starting to combine that with looking at what the labour market looks like. What type of talents do we need within this organisation or this type of sector? You know, how do we find that talent? How do we look for those people? Well, they're all in part of the community and the commercial platforms that bring all these participants together. And I think that's the other part, that this also gives you that ability to engage employers directly from a community group. So rather than just sort of trying to attract people to come and work with the school, for example, it could be that actually you turn around and are more productive about how you use your data to attract employers into the business. So as an example, on the next slide, you can see that part of the data that you can gather from the platform also shows you the types of careers that are available. So all of those matches that happen. Are we going to? Yeah, so it will give you that data range around the career pieces. So as a school, as a community group, as a region, you'll be able to see that you have, you know, a sector of people who match to particular careers. And in here, we've got one that we've highlighted here, which is fitness instructors. So again, you could use the career coach data to then analyse, well, you know, what type of growth industry is that within our region? Is it rising, falling? Who are the top employers? But also you then can reach out to those people and actually demonstrate that you have this diverse talent pool available. That to me is a much more powerful engagement, and also it encourages those employers to think differently about, well, how do we nurture that talent? How do we give them opportunities to understand that industry? And then potentially when they start to leave school or think about their next steps, they're already part of that process. So it's a really powerful way of using data to attract people in. This is obviously looking at career coaching. Will, do you just want to do a quick workaround on how that all comes together?
Yeah, sure. So Career Coach is a well-established platform that Lightcast have. It's used by a range of organisations from in the education space through to local government and local enterprise partnerships and universities. Essentially what it's doing is providing an end user view of localized labour market information. So that would be down to local authority or borough level. And as Nikki mentioned previously, we have insight in regards to the 369 standard occupation classifications at a 4-digit level. So this is for programmers and software development professionals, and you'll see the kind of insight that it provides. It's a mixture of structural data, which we'll use to provide an accurate view of the volume of people that are employed within that said occupation. But then we'll also use real-time view of recruitment activity to see whether recruitment activity is increasing, decreasing, kind of staying at the same level, and that is updated monthly. Our structural data is updated twice a year. And essentially what we're trying to do is provide insight that can inform people's decision making about whether that is an interesting occupation for them to pursue, whether it's a good fit for the skills and the talent that they've defined, and obviously what the salary would be as well. So yeah, I mean, essentially that is it. The interesting thing and the thing I'm excited about is how you take that insight and put it alongside that people-centric data and that way in which people can define their talents and skills more broadly that Nikki was talking about. The other things to mention in regards to Career Coach, other than that insight in regards to occupations and data, it also allows people to take a careers assessment, so a psychometric test, essentially looking at their personality and matching their personality to jobs, which again is really complementary to what Naturally Talented Me are doing. There's a CV building tool. And then really importantly, we're also taking our job postings, this is a new feature, and we're providing a live view of job postings by occupation. So for example, if you had picked the fitness instructor example, then you can look at what live job vacancies there are for fitness instructors within the defined geography. So it's really taking that person on a journey from thinking at the very start and really thinking about defining their skills, their talents, through to thinking about occupations in terms of the opportunity. Is it growing? Is it declining? What would the salary be? Who are the employers? Through to actually being able to create CVs and apply for jobs, all within within the combined offer of Naturally Talented Me's platform and the Career Coach portal. Nikki, back to you.
Thanks. Yes, so Will's obviously highlighted there that this is the interconnect that really is the journey from, you know, understanding yourself. So it's bringing together that precise mapping, and a lot of the local government accounts that we're talking to at the moment are really excited about how they can support people in that journey, but also understand what the linkage is between, you know, the mapping from I want to be this or I want to do that, from actually understanding there's a whole raft of opportunities for me, through to, you know, where do I go to find that. And I think that's really important when you've got a partnership such as ourselves, that's taking you from, you know, a complete journey from end to end. And, you know, then, you know, once you start talking about training and development, you have the perfect package there to then start driving people into roles that potentially, that, you know, there might be roles that are really struggling to employ at the moment. So it is really that consistent view of understanding, you know, how do we bring these pieces together, and it does deliver a complete employability program across, you know, small groups or community groups or even regions that perhaps previously have had lots of great individual pieces provided to them, but not all of them bring together this one complete end-to-end solution. So I think that's really key for us and our partnership, but also to understand some of those inhibitors is quite a big challenge as well. And I think early engagement with primary schools, for example, is a great example of how removing stereotyping can keep them engaged in education, help them building different mindsets, thinking differently about opportunities that are available to them, but also bringing employers in to help them make that journey a successful journey for them, but also for employers to know that there are talent pools, you know, growing and coming through that pipeline. So I think that's really key for us, is that partnership is really providing that end-to-end journey. The big picture for us, one of the things that we're very conscious of is you know, this big picture thinking, which I think is important now, specifically when we're talking about some of these government drivers and the government programs that are out there, which we'll talk about a little bit in a moment. But we think it's really important that we have this big picture view. You know, there's lots of programs that do small pieces for small groups. What we're trying to do here is to widen that into the big picture. That could be for regions, it could be for the UK wide, but the idea here is about, you know, how do we make sure that the delivery mechanisms that we're providing to make these programs successful, to utilize the funding that's available so you have maximum output. You know, that is about how we think differently. That's about how we grow a bigger picture view. You know, it's about securing those new career opportunities for people that would never have thought about those before, you know, getting the employers more involved. So it is very much a big picture service, and it's removing the void that we currently have. You know, it's great to think about an individual, what they think they could do, but now it's about opening that opportunity and bringing that connection into the labour market data so that they understand what's available to them locally. And after all, a lot of regions are very keen to retain talent within the region, so it's a great way of being able to do that. It maximises on your local talent, and it means that you've actually then got a greater talent pool to work from and to extract from.
No, I think that last point's really relevant, Nikki. When we're seeing everywhere, we've ended up with a very tight labour market, and I think I mentioned this at the start, but again, in terms of thinking differently, it feels like now is a time that places should be thinking about how they support those and make sure that they support those people within their communities to realise opportunities that are available to them, but also just in terms of supporting employers. And as you said, that point which I know is really relevant to many of our local enterprise partnerships and local government customers, retain talent in their area that otherwise could go elsewhere.
Yeah. So going back to the kind of bigger picture agenda, we've had a really in-depth look at all the government programs at the moment, which I know, Will, you've mentioned at the beginning, but it's fundamentally for us, the themes are very, very similar. And the themes are very much touching on that. How do we now create something that supports everybody? I mean, just looking at some of them on the slide here, you know, challenging social barriers, you know, embracing the data revolution to deliver real needs, broader, deeper, long-term solutions. You know, these things in reality can only come into play when you start to look at how you have products that come together to work alongside that journey, but also support that journey from start to finish. You know, give everyone the opportunity to flourish. That's a really very broad, you know, comment to make or driver to have. But the reality of it is, you know, there are those kind of pieces that we can support, but it's very much about thinking differently. And I know we keep saying that, but you know, it's a little bit like the Einstein quote of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different outcomes. You know, we can't keep doing that. We've actually got to think differently about how we're going to approach some of these subjects. And it can't just be for the small groups anymore, because the reality is those furthest from the job market aren't part of some of those small groups. They might be part of, you know, diverse groups that currently don't have the funding to support them. So we do have to start to bring a lot of these programs together, but also maximize on that funding so that we're delivering something that does provide that end-to-end solution for them. And, you know, we're not saying this is the be all and end all. What we're saying is this is part of that requirement and part of that resolution of what they're trying to do. And as you know, as we've been mentioning along this whole journey of talking with you know, to yourselves, there are particular things that NTM delivers across the whole agenda, and you know, accompanied by Career Coach. You know, we are talking about that. You know, it's that whole program of supporting everybody, giving everybody the opportunity, embracing technology, looking at how we target provision. You know, how do we know what programs we need to provide to community groups if we don't understand what the people requirements are? So it's, you know, how do we utilize funding to focus on, well, you know, if we have travel restrictions for particular groups and community groups, how do we resolve that? How do we resolve some of the financial barriers? How do we make sure that, you know, all these people who are in different situations have an opportunity to be seen and found? And it's very much about how do we support that. And you know, everybody has talent, and unfortunately that's one of the things that we always say. We all have talents, it's just how we apply them, how we understand them, and actually how we're seen for those talents. How do people find you for those talents that really fundamentally provide the potential that you have? Sorry, well, any comments from your side?
I think, yeah, no, I think that last point there is really, really key. And it comes back to a recurring theme really in terms of the discussion today, in terms of raising aspirations, how you work with individuals to increase their confidence in terms of their abilities. And I think what I really like about what you do through your platform is the way it gets people to define and think about their talents, and then be able to showcase those to a wider audience. And I think, obviously, I think this relates, without, you know, labouring the point, it really does relate to the fact that we are in a position of having a tight labour market. We know that unemployment is very, very low, and therefore I think it's imperative that new approaches are taken to how you engage people, those people that are further from the labour market, or maybe just disengaged. And there may be a very simple, there may be a very complex reason as to why they are disengaged. And as you said, this is part of the solution. There may be other things that are needed. But I think this takes us to our poll. Now, I'm hoping Oh, there you go. So this it works. Brilliant. So I shouldn't sound surprised, should I? So this is essentially we're keen to know. We've talked about policy and we've talked about particular drivers that we think are relevant to this agenda that we've been talking about today, but we'd really like to get your views. So we've picked 4, including the obligatory other. So we've identified levelling up, which we've talked about in many of our other webinars from Lightcast. We've had a series on levelling up. We know that's important. We've also got no one left behind, which is one that really came to my awareness through working with Naturally Talented Me. And then there's the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which we know is currently out there, is being defined, and will be deployed going forward. So those were 3 that were at the top of our list, but really interested to know what your views are. So do vote. It is anonymous, I should say, as well. And then I'm assuming we'll get the results.
Oh,
there we are.
fantastic.
Okay, so we've got pretty broad numbers here. So we've got 20% for levelling up, which I thought may have been the top one by a while, by a bit. We've got 30% for no one left behind, which I think is really interesting, Nikki.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, that's one that you really brought to our attention.
Yeah.
We've got the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which to some extent is linked to both levelling up and no one left behind. And then we've got other as well. Do feel free to share what other may have been within the questions, and I'll share that with the audience. And thank you, Debbie, for running the poll. So let's just have a quick look. I think the next thing we've got are questions. So I'm just going to check what we have.
Interesting.
Here.
No one left behind. Just while you're having a look, Will, was that's something that launched. I think it was, and I'm sure somebody will correct me on, but that was around 2019 when that first came into play. But with all the other issues that then suddenly snowballed, I think that got kind of pushed away, or it certainly got sort of pushed to the back a little bit. And I know there are particular regions who are very heavily focused on no one left behind, and that's why for us that's some of the work that we've been doing with local government, in that, you know, those agendas I think have been ticking along and they've been thinking about them and they've had time to focus on them and think a little bit more about what it is they want to put into that. So actually they are ones that we, and a lot of our development, our roadmap over the last 6 to 12 months have been around, you know, how do we start to support those types of things, and that's where things like inhibitors, for example, came into play. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that number, because I kind of assumed that it was just pockets. So it's really good to see that is a quite wide agenda.
So I've got a couple of questions here to share with you, Nikki. Unsurprisingly, they are primarily for you, but do feel free to bring me in as you see fit. The first one was, got a question really asking you to explain how individuals are helped through the platform to identify their talents. Is it from like a long list of talents and skills which they select? So feel free to elaborate and share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the original design of the platform was really based around keeping it very, very simple, because of the community groups that we were looking at, and because a lot of our focus also was on early years support, because, you know, that those kind of requirements are where, you know, the stereotyping starts to happen. So we've designed the platform so it's very, very simple for an individual to be able to navigate, and it's very much about thinking about their hobbies, thinking about their interests, thinking about particular things around how they learn, for example, and that unlocks the talents that then come up and showcases their top 10 talents. And so the reason it's done in that way is because obviously, as I mentioned earlier, foundationally, the things you do every day and, you know, the things that you enjoy and things you do outside of work drive that kind of personality trait, those talents that you have, and you do them because you're good at them and you enjoy doing them. And so that's the main ethos behind the platform. Is it's very, very simple to use. It's very easy to navigate. However, with some of the additional pieces that we've been building into the platform, some of that is based around a commercial community model. So for example, the inhibitor questions, we've also got potentially how we can support vocational profiling. Those pieces are designed to work within a mentor group, within a community group. So for an end user, you've got, you know, a very simple platform that you can build your portfolio, you can, you know, work your way through, and you could end up with one that looks very much like Sam's. You could do that easily yourself. But when you start to build in the inhibitor pieces and the vocational profiling pieces that you want to capture within the back end of their portfolio to support that individual, they are very much focused on community groups that are supporting those individuals. So, you know, again, it could be a school, it could be a charity, it could be just an intervention organisation. So it's very much, it depends on how far you want to take creating your portfolio, and then obviously from a community, how much you want to build that in within your participants.
Thanks, Nikki. That's really helpful. I'm guessing that if people want to explore and build their own platform, then they can go to the Naturally Talented Me website, can't they?
Yes, end users, any end user is very welcome to use our platform free of charge. And, you know, we are a community interest company for that very reason. We want everybody to have that opportunity to be able to utilise the platform. But of course, that's the very basic version. So that's just creating your See Me portfolio.
Yeah. The other question I've got here, which I think is a really interesting one, is asking how businesses, employers have responded to this approach.
That is a really interesting question. We found that over the last 2 years, the employers have been probably a bit withdrawn from thinking differently about how they look at those diverse talent pools. And some of that's been because their own challenges as organisations, you know, how they support their own staff. Now, the platform itself could be used within an organisation. So an employer could actually use our community platform to understand their organisation, what, you know, the data mix of the employees, and actually use that to move employees around within the business. But actually employers are now really starting to think differently about, you know, how do I get to those diverse talent pools? How do I know who's out there? Because they are struggling to recruit using the sort of standard processes. And, you know, there's lots of sectors that are now talking about, well, you know, how do we attract people into, you know, the sports industry, the creative industry, the construction industry? We can't use the same processes because actually it's not invigorating people enough, it's not attracting them enough. And that's why this approach is more positive, because it's about the individual understanding what they could do, and then that aligns to those industries. So the employers have been a bit reticent from the beginning. However, I see that changing quite dramatically, and we have a lot of employers within some of the local government regions that we're working with who are now seeing that by building that data, the people data, the understanding of the career matches that are going on, actually that becomes a more powerful attraction to them, because they can start to see those talent pools, and therefore they can start to promote their organisation and the jobs that are available, but doing it in a very different way. It's not talking about here's a job description, here's a word search match, you know, if you've got these qualifications. It's about how do I find the right employee who would be that real sort of core employee who I know they've got the right passions, drivers, abilities, and the talent, so that I can then develop them. So it's that piece that has been, I think, the eye-opener for a lot of employers now. But initially they have been a little bit reticent to engage, but like I say, through the community groups we're working with, a lot more are seeing the value of doing that different thinking, really.
One of the questions I had was whether the No One Left Behind policy that we've talked about, whether that is UK wide or whether it's just for Scotland. My understanding is that that's UK wide.
It is UK wide, yeah. It's not, as I say, on everybody's agenda, but it is a UK wide.
And it has been around a bit longer than Levelling Up, so it might just be it's interesting that people are still focusing on it, and it is still relevant, as it should be. I've had a few other questions. One was asking, oh, someone didn't get the chance to vote. Apologies about that. If you want to share what you would have voted for, obviously it wouldn't be anonymous in questions. We can take that into account. In future, I'll give a bit longer for people to vote. I didn't realize I'd gone through it quite that quickly. Then someone's asked about a case study of how businesses have engaged with the approach. We can work on something around that. I think that's probably the end of most of the questions. I had a few observations as well. One which I thought was really interesting, saying that that what you were discussing, Nikki, really chimed with similar experience that they had had with skills bridges during the pandemic, and the Nesta career causeway maps, which I think is interesting. So it's obviously chiming with other things that people have been engaged with and working on. And as you said, this is very much something that has come out of that those lockdown and pandemic periods. It's all happened in that time frame, and I know our partnership has developed over that time. What I'm going to do now is wrap things up, just to say thank you for everyone that's joined us. Don't leave just yet. A couple of things to mention. If you want to find out more, you can get in touch with either myself or with Nikki directly. The slides will be circulated and you'll have our contact details. And if you want to find out about how this could work in your area, happy to explore those conversations with you. Also wanted to mention, there's not going to be any webinars in August. It seems like the world is going on holiday at one point or another. So we're going to pause things in August, and then we're going to pick up webinars in September. One which I thought was really relevant is my colleague Lester Biddle will be running a webinar looking at cybersecurity skills, and that brings in one of our customers, who represented by Sam Donaldson from Perspective Economics. Should be a really interesting look at what is definitely a high growth occupation with very technical skills associated to it. So I know it's it should be of interest to a broad range of people out there in webinar land. So it would be remiss of me not to thank you again for joining us, and hope that you have a great summer break. Big thanks to Nikki for joining us today, and for Debbie for running the poll and for introducing us right at the start. Thanks all.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.